Hi, YouTube. It's Wisconsin Shoe Guy here. Today, I wanted to do a couple of shoe battle videos, and they may be posted separately if I can't figure out how to merge them together. But in the first segment, I'm going to be comparing some split toes, both vintage and modern from a few different makers, just to kind of look at the hand stitching and what makes them unique. And then in the second portion, I'm going to take a look at a couple of plain toe bluchers, and which I'm actually going to be wearing at the time, and seeing how they compare to each other. So hopefully you find it interesting. I thought it would be kind of cool to do something a little different today and change the format up a little bit. So I appreciate all the comments and feedback that I'm getting from everyone. So thank you for that. And with that, let's go ahead and kick it off. The split toe derby is a really fantastic shoe. It's one of the favorites in my collection. And what I like about it is that, frankly, it's not that popular. A lot of people don't really like this style. A lot of brands carry it, so it's not unpopular, but it's also not what you're going to see on an everyday, business meeting type of thing. So I went to a sales meeting last year. We had about 2,000 sales reps there, and I saw 2 pairs of this designer shoe. So that is kind of for what it's worth, just an example of what's there. 99% of people wear cap toe Oxfords. That's just what they wear. So I like to mix things up a little bit. Obviously, I'm a little into shoes. So what I want to do today, though, is I want to compare some vintage and talk a little bit about what makes the vintage, and then talk about a couple of contemporary ones to compare. So sorry for the repetition. This is a pair of Florsheim shoes. This was actually a special markup, so it's very difficult to age them. But I would say that these are probably 1980s, maybe late 70s. I bought them from a person who was selling them in a shoe group for vintage shoes. And I have had a number of experts actually look at them, and they do appear with every respect to be authentic. Now, people buy into vintage shoes for a couple different reasons. First, it is very, very hard to find the old quality of leather, of stitching, of everything that makes the shoes what they were in the 70s and 80s. I even have one pair from the 60s compared to what they are today. But secondly, and I think that this is probably the most important, is that you're able to do so at a very reasonable price point compared to buying new shoes. So it's not as if it's very rare to find a pair of vintage shoes that will cost the equivalent of something new. And as you take a look at what they are just a fantastic bargain for what that price is. Now, some people will only buy what they call NOS, which is new old stock. And I couldn't afford that because those tend to run the highest of the gamut in vintage shoes. And so what you want to do is find something that's lightly worn, and that's kind of unique. So these particular shoes were a special makeup, as I said. Split toes among old Florsheims are really rare. You can tell that it's a special markup because when you look inside, instead of actually having a number, it has a model number, which actually probably could be, I think, is for the actual model itself. But then below that, it actually has this guy's name, Dick Porchel. So I don't know who Dick is, and I'm sure he was a great guy, but these are the shoes that were made for him, and through an indirect way, they came to be in my care. Now, this is in the 70s and 80s, Florsheim had a pebble grain calf that they actually called cashmere calf, and it I don't know whether or not this is cashmere calf or not. I can tell you that I have a pair of 93602s from Florsheim, which is much, much softer, also in pebble grain. But this is really, really smooth, as you would expect, because it's been around for a long time, and has a very unique stitching pattern here, where it actually looks like there's little bubbles along the way. But you can see that this is definitely 2 different pieces of material that are joined together. And then you have the split toe that's cut in between. So I also like the fact that they have this pattern here, and then this is a relative hole cut. So it's kind of one piece, and then it's split, and then it's another piece and then they have the patch in the middle. So it's 1 piece, 2 piece. You got the piece underneath here, 3 piece, 4 piece, 5 piece. This is the same piece as the tongue. So it's 5 pieces of leather all sewn together to make the shoe. Now, obviously, there's a lining and there's a lot of other pieces like that, but it's an interesting design and unique compared to my others. So this is the vintage Florsheim, and it has this unique pattern. Now, I went through my shoe collection, and I've got 18 pairs of split toes in my collection. So I was able to find a pair that has a very similar stitching and pattern. Okay, so you can see that it's different. And this is an Alden. This is a 962. And what's different about this, though, is that this is the same piece of leather. So this is not joined here. This is just stitching, which is adornment, both on the toe and on the apron. So that's a very different piece. Now this is a traditional derby, so it has just the piece here, the piece there. It has a heel cap on it, which is unique, and I like the way Alden, instead of having a seam, cuts out this little box here. That's a very uniquely Alden thing, I believe. I've never seen it on another shoe. And I do like the way they've got the toes very pronounced. So this is Alden. Now, if you look at the stitching, and the Florsheim has a contrast stitch going, and I've asked a number of people about this and whether or not the stitching is original on here, and they believe that it is because of the contrast color. And if you look at the sole with these pebbles here, now the heel is not original. Somebody put that rubber heel on top, but the rest of it appears to be. So that's a piece there. Now you can see Florsheim did not do a lot of fudging. Okay, fudging is the kind of indentations along here that match, and Alden does a pretty good job of when they put those in the fudging on the welt line. It actually tries to cover up the stitches, which is kind of cool, different kind of thing. And actually, as I look at it front on, I'm not even sure that that is fudging. That may just be the stitches themselves. So sometimes the angle on the camera is not that good. So those are just the extra stitches. Pardon me. So we'll take that one back. Then we've got Ellen Edmonds, and Ellen Edmonds has a number of split toe designs. The closest one to the Florsheim is this one, where they're actually combining. So it's got the same number of pieces of leather, but you can see the design is quite different. So this is technically a derby. This is technically a blucher, and that's because this piece, the part that has the eyelets here, are actually connected to the back, right? So that's a piece there. But if you look at the stitching here, you can see that that stitching is really pretty well done, but it doesn't have that really cool pattern in it. And I don't know how that pattern is made, whether it's tighter or something like that, but it's just a different design. Now, I have a number of shoes that are just like this from Ellen Edmonds, and then I have the other designs where it's like a flat piece that lays on top of the shoe and is sewn down. Those are machine, actually, sewn instead of hand sewn. But this style appears to be hand sewn based on the research that I've done. Now, I mean, obviously these parts are all machine done. So different styles, different for different shoes. Now, I wanted to do a couple of textured grains because I think part of what makes the Florsheim so cool is the texture on the shoe, right? And so I went with this pebble grain. This is a really traditional pebble grain. This is an English shoemaker. This is Crockett and Jones, and it has the traditional heel cap and derby, very similar to the Alden, but you can see that the toe sewing is very different. They basically just took the two pieces, sewed them together there. And so when you look at these two compared on the aprons, they look quite different. Okay? The split toe looks similar, but the aprons themselves look different. Now, compare this to the Alden, right? And it's a different look still. It's different than all the Ellen Edmonds, including the one that I have here. And it is actually similar to a Sons of Henry shoe that I'm bringing out, which is also in a grain leather, which is a little different. Now you can see that this shoe has a much narrower last and a very different shape to it. This is your more traditional chunky outdoor you know, kind of big man shoe kind of thing, which I'm a big man, so that's part of what I like. This is your sleeker, more toned down derby. It is one piece. It doesn't have the cut there like the Florsheim does, but it has heel caps, which the Florsheim does not. Now this is what they call Utah calf. And Sons of Henry is one of the few makers outside of some of the really high-end makers to use Utah calf. So I was able to get these for a good price, you know, compared to jumping into, you know, a $2,000 pair or $1,500 pair of Edward Greens. But very, very nice shoes. And I like the way the stitching is done, which I talked about before. And I really like the way Utah calf wears. If I wear these for about an hour, they feel very soft, like butter soft, really, really soft. So they're a great shoe, and it's a different way of doing it, also a blucher style, and definitely something to keep in mind. Now, when you look at the MTO programs at Carmina and some of the other makers, they have both the derby style and the blucher style. They're not always in their ready-to-wear programs, so sometimes that's you know, a difference that you can choose, which will make your shoes a little bit more unique. I have a few that are in the blucher style, including some Ascot, which are just beautiful shoes, and you know, well made. You know, another hand-stitched apron, really at a totally different level with those. But wanted to show you those. I thought that this gives you an interesting idea. This isn't really a shoe battle because I'm not going to choose a winner here, but I did want to point out that this Florsheim really holds its own against all of these shoes. And, you know, say the Sons of Henry is probably, you know, $300, $350 new. You can probably pick these up for 150 to maybe 200 bucks on eBay if you're very generous. So something to keep in mind, and hopefully that is helpful information for you. So anywho, thank you very much for watching, and this is Wisconsin Shoe Guy. I'm going to switch it over to the other section now where I'm wearing the shoes, and if it just ends, that means I didn't figure out the editing, so apologies there, and I will keep working on it. Thanks all, and thanks for watching. Bye now.
Hey YouTube, it's Wisconsin Shoe Guy here. I thought I would do a different kind of video today. Today I'm actually wearing two similar but very different shoes. On the left side of the screen, I have the Crockett & Jones Lanark 3, and on the right part of the screen, I am wearing the Trickers Robert. Now, both of these are brown shoes. The Trickers here is actually in a brown museum calf, where the Crockett & Jones is in a brown calf. You'll also notice that my feet seem at slightly different levels, and that's because the sole on the Crockett & Jones is a double sole, and the sole on the Trickers is a single leather sole. It's not even rubber. So why would you choose different ones? You'll also notice they have different lacing styles here, and I wanted to explain that as well. In my opinion, and listen, I'm not a fashion expert, nobody pays me for my opinion, but in my opinion, when the closure on the facing right here is too close, then the cross lacing doesn't really work as well. And then you have a choice, right? You can either do bar lacing like an Oxford, or you come up with some other cross lacing like I've done here, which is more suitable to a derby. I don't like bar lacing on derbies. I don't think that it's a very good look. Now you can also use thicker laces, kind of like I have here on the Trickers. That is another option as well. So, but I try to keep them you know, somewhat different. And as you can see, the Trickers is just a little bit tighter around the vamp. They're both a size 10 UK, so not a lot of difference there. You'll notice that the break on them is almost identical in the part of the shoe. Now the Trickers is unlined, which means that it's a little bit looser on my foot because the lining isn't there on both sides. But aside from that, the feel on them is virtually identical, aside from the fact that this is a rubber sole, and this one is leather. Now, so I have thicker laces on the triggers, and I do the crisscross lacing all the way up. And then here you can see that I've done this crossbar lacing on the Crockett & Jones, which you'll notice on a lot of my derbies, especially ones that close quite this much. Now with Crockett & Jones, as with most brands, one of the things that I've tried is actually sizing down in order to provide more of a gap there. You see this a lot with Oxfords, but with Crockett & Jones, if I put my foot into a 9.5, I can't stand. So it's just too small. It makes my foot cramp. So therefore, I have to be in a 10. And that is actually true not only on the 378 last, but on the 325, the 348, all of them. So just the way my foot is shaped, and something that I have learned to live with. Now, there are a couple of other really cool details about this that differentiates these shoes, which I wanted to point out. First, if you look at the triggers closely, and here, one of the things I'm going to do is I'm just going to lower the camera so that it's a little bit easier to see. If you look at the top of the welt, there is contrast stitching. That means that you can easily see the welt stitches and how they are across the shoe. And you can see that this is a 360-degree welt as well. Now, you move on to the Crockett & Jones here, and you'll see that the stitching, while visible, is not contrast stitching, and so it is a little bit harder to see. Now, that's a design element, something that somebody did on purpose. As a matter of fact, if you take your shoes to a cobbler for resoling, you can actually choose the color of the stitching that you want on the top and on the bottom. And that's one of those things that a lot of people like to do. Now, the other thing that's really different is that there is a sewn-in design on the heel on the triggers that makes it look like a heel cap. Now, this is a whole cut blucher, meaning that it is one piece of leather, but by putting in that design on the heel, they've done a really nice job at triggers in making this distinctive. This is the only plain toe blucher that I have that has that. It has the patch across the back. The Crockett & Jones has no such heel adornation at all, and it has the same patch across the back. Now, the patches do look slightly different, but are in general pretty darn close. So now the other thing that is different is the last. If you look at the shape of the Crockett & Jones right at the toe, I believe, and I'm not measuring this, but I believe it's just a touch, a squidge narrower than the triggers is. Now, again, that could just be an optical illusion, and I'm not measuring it. So just food for thought for all those people out there. But you know, it's a very, very similar, as the stylish shoe should be. It's a very similar overall shape. So, but I believe the triggers is just a skosh wider. So, this is Wisconsin Shoe Guy. This is another different format of video, and I'm interested in your feedback. Let me know how you like it. Thanks much, and have a wonderful day. Thanks for watching.